Hello champions and happy Monday. Today's going to be a great day. We're going to use what we've learned about comparing and adding unlike fractions to subtract unlike fractions. I know you can do it, and so does Mr. Smiles. Let's dive right in. Let's start by going over our do now. First, simplify 8/12. Well, what's the largest number that goes into both 8 and 12? 4 is the largest number that goes into both. When I divide 8 and 12 by 4, what is my new fraction in simplest form? It's 2/3. Now let's add 3/5 plus 1/4. Remember, it's always easiest if I line my fractions up vertically. That means up and down. The first thing I need to do is find the least common denominator. List your 5's and your 4's to find the least common denominator. The least common denominator is 20. Now I need to change both fractions so that they have a denominator of 20. When I change 3/5 so that the denominator is 20, what is the new numerator? Well, 5 times 4 is 20, so I need to multiply 3 times 4 as well. 3 times 4 is 12. When I change 1/4 so that the denominator is 20, what is the new numerator? Well, 4 times 5 is 20. I have to multiply 1 times 5 as well. 1/4 is the same as 5 over 20. Now my fractions are ready to add because they have the same denominator. 12 plus 5 is 17, and my denominator stays the same. The answer is 17 over 20. Let's look at the next example. 100 minus 3 times bracket 5 times parentheses 2 plus 3. The first thing I need to do is what's inside of parentheses 2 plus 3, and I'll bring everything else down. 100 minus 3. Remember, when a number is right next to a grouping symbol, it means to multiply. 5 times 5. What would I do next? I would do 5 times 5 because it's still inside of grouping symbols. What's 5 times 5? 5 times 5 is 25. So now I'll bring down 100 minus 3 times 25. What should I do next? I should do 3 times 25 because multiplication comes before subtraction. Well, now I've got 100 minus 75. What's 100 minus 75? 100 minus 75 is 25. The next question asks, would the sum of these two numbers be greater than or less than 1? Well, I know that 6/8 is greater than 1/2, and 2/3 is greater than 1/2. Because both numbers are greater than 1/2, their sum will be greater than 1. Let's dive right into our lesson today. On Monday, Erica walked 4/5 of a mile. On Tuesday, Erica walked 1/2 of a mile. How much farther did Erica walk on Monday than on Tuesday? This problem is asking me to subtract 4/5 of a mile minus 1/2 of a mile because I'm finding the difference between them. What's the first thing I need to do to add or subtract unlike fractions? I need to find the least common denominator. Go ahead and list your multiples of 5 and 2 to find your least common denominator. What is the LCD? The smallest number that is a multiple of both 5 and 2 is 10. Next, I would need to change both of these fractions so that they had a denominator of 10. When I change 4/5 so that the denominator is 10, what is the new numerator? Well, 5 times 2 is 10. 4 times 2 is 8. When I change 1/2 so that the denominator is 10, what is the new numerator? Well, 2 times 5 is 10. 1 times 5 is 5. Now I'm ready to subtract my fractions. 8/10 minus 5/10 is 3/10. Erica walked 3/10 of a mile farther on Monday than on Tuesday. Let's look at another example. Zedric was painting a fence. He had 7/8 gallon of paint when he started. He used 3/4 of a gallon. How much paint did Zedric have remaining when he finished? Well, in this case I'm subtracting because I'm taking paint away. Zedric started with 7/8 and he took away 3/4 of the gallon. The first thing I need to do is find the least common denominator. To do that, I need to list the multiples of 8 and 4. Go ahead and do that now to find the LCD. The least common denominator is 8. Now I need to change both fractions so that they have a denominator of 8. I can't subtract until both fractions have the same denominator. 7/8 already has a denominator of 8. How would I change 3/4 so that it has a denominator of 8? I would multiply times 2 in the numerator and the denominator. What is my new numerator? It's 6. 3/4 is the same as 6/8. Now we're ready to subtract. What's 7/8 minus 6/8? 7/8 minus 6/8 is 1/8. Zedric would have 1/8 gallon remaining. Let's try another example. What's 1/3 minus 1/4? Well, I'm going to start by lining up my fractions vertically. What should I do next? I need to find the least common denominator. What's the least common denominator? The least common denominator is 12. When I change 1/3 so that the denominator is 12, what is my new numerator? Well, 3 times 4 is 12. 1 times 4 is 4. When I change 1/4 so that the denominator is 12, what is my new numerator? Well, 4 times 3 is 12. 1 times 3 is 3. Now I'm ready to subtract my fractions. 4/12 minus 3/12 is 1/12. Now you try one. What's 5/8 minus 2/5? Well, 5/8 and 2/5 have a least common denominator of 40. To change 5/8 so that the denominator is 40, I need to multiply by 5 in both the numerator and the denominator. 5 times 5 is 25. To change 2/5 so that the denominator is 40, I need to multiply by 8 in both the numerator and the denominator. 2 times 8 is 16. Now I'm ready to subtract. 25 over 40 minus 16 over 40 is 9 over 40. You try one more. What's 2/6 minus 1/3? Check your work with mine to see if you got it correct. 2/6 minus 1/3 is 0 over 6, or just 0. Try one more. Check your work with mine to make sure you got it correct. 1/2 minus 3/7 is 1/14. You've done a great job on this video. Go ahead and finish your page of practice.